people could do one thing, what would you have them do? And my response is volunteer. Find something you love to do, something you're passionate about, and get out there and volunteer, because you're going to find yourself elbow to elbow who care about the same thing you do. But the people who see you volunteering, who have no interest in what you're doing, oh, it's a pet charity, I could care less. But they know just by virtue of the fact that you're giving your time that you're a good person.
We are looking forward our way from Studio C in the 511 studios in the Brewery District, just south of downtown Columbus, Ohio. This is Brett. Today we have networking trailblazers in the house. Listeners, you may feel the term networking has been overused. However, it's still a critical component to our work world, whether we're trying to build a business, gain an employment. Today, let's welcome two very successful business entrepreneurs and networkers, and both have been on the front lines helping others in our community gain networking skills and contacts. Let's welcome, first of all, Ken Lazar. He is the CEO of the Ability Professional Network. Its focusing is upon sales and technical recruiting. Ken's also a co-founder of the Sales Connection, founder of Tuesday Tune-Up, and was instrumental during the 2008 recession developing the Scioto Ridge Job Networking Group, a highly successful community service for job seekers. And we also have Frank Egan. He is the principal and area director of AmSpirit Business Connections. Frank also founded the Networking Hub and the Networking RX podcast program. And Frank is also the founder of the Charitable Roundtable, which provides nonprofit administrators the opportunity to increase their networking skills while building community connections. Thank you both for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Brett.
Yeah, this is great. I was a little confused. You said successful people. I was looking towards the door for somebody to come in.
He was talking about you.
I think Brett, we're going to have a great time today. Listeners, you're going to hear us. You're going to hear us laughing. These two guys, I'm telling you, I've known them for many, many years in my previous life at a nonprofit, and truly, when I say during the recession, they were just pivotal in helping people get back to getting jobs, building their business. And it hasn't been that many years ago. We think it has, but it's really, it's a lifetime ago, but yesterday, in terms of issues of people having difficulty in employment.
Yeah, and when you're talking to the younger people, they don't understand what the Great Recession was.
Right.
Yeah.
They weren't working back then.
Yeah,
but there was a lot of people that were out of work back then.
Oh my gosh. I give Ken more credit than me, because I'm an entrepreneur and I was just out working. But I just think you rescued a lot of people with your program. What was the name of that?
Jumpstart, Scioto Ridge.
Yeah, that was iconic.
Well, I had a lot of help. I mean,
still, everything rises and falls on leadership. So.
It was we were in like, I think, 6 churches in Columbus in the evenings trying to get people back to work. It was we thank all of those pastors and churches that helped us during that time. It was
right,
awesome.
It was good.
Right. We were literally networking in every possible corner we could find.
Yeah.
But we got out of it.
Yeah.
We successfully got out of it. So today's world is a lot different. Still lots of issues, still people having trouble finding jobs. So thank you both for coming to help us today to talk about networking, because it is pivotal in our job searching. We're going to talk today, listeners, about both job searching and building your business using networking, how it's different, what's going on. But before we dive into what exactly networking is, I first want to talk about their backgrounds. So what brought you to your current organizations, and how did you decide to reach out into Central Ohio and connect people in networks? So Ken, let's start with you. Tell us how you got here.
Well, long-time resident of Columbus, in and out of Columbus several times over my career, but I've been here for past about 20 years, and always been in the business of putting people to work. Whether I was with corporations that did that, temporary employees, it was just kind of like a passion of mine to getting people to work. So what got me to Ability Professional Network is, I think, Frank, you told me to quit my job and go in business for myself.
Did I?
I think you told me.
Are you blaming me or giving me credit?
I don't know. I think maybe a little bit both.
Yeah.
I left a large corporate life to go to a smaller company, a search firm, and I realized that was probably not the best move. And my wife, I came home one night like we always do, and she looked at me and she says, "You don't like your job, do you?" And I said, "No. How could you tell?" He says, "Well, I could tell." And she says, "Well, you've been putting the people to work all of these years. Why don't you just start your own company?" So at this point in time, I'm 62 years old, and I'm saying, "Do you understand what that means, starting our own company and working?" So she says, "Yeah, let's do it." So we started with nothing. But what I learned, though, and when we talk about networking, is that over these years, all of the people that we touched and all of the groups and everything, there's a bank account called Social Capital. And I had a pretty good bank account on Social Capital. So when I put my shingle out, people, "Well, you need a website. Let me do a website for you. You need a logo. Let me do a logo for you. Let me help you with your business cards. Let me help you with your mission statement." So that's how I got here. We're celebrating our 10th year, and things are going well. And we continue to put people to work.
Wonderful.
Good.
Wonderful.
Good.
Frank?
Yeah, my story starts back in 1984. I came here to go to law school. Didn't even know where Ohio State was, but I got a law degree. I got an MBA from Ohio State and started my career in public accounting. I was a tax consultant. It was a great job. It was great pay. It was great everything. Glass window office in the Chase building, way up high. The only problem is I didn't want to do taxes, which is kind of a non-starter for a tax consultant, right? So I mean, it was a good job, and I have some great friends and great memories and learned a lot. But I left to go into private practice, figuring that would be my next best step. And a funny thing happened when I went into private practice, and the funny thing was nothing happened. I had no idea how to get clients, and I didn't have the social capital that Ken had. I was probably 34, 35 years old. Didn't really know anybody in Columbus other than the people I worked with. I was scared I was going to fail. Somebody said you should go check out a tips club or a leads group, and there was an organization in town out of Pittsburgh that put together groups of entrepreneurs, sales reps, and professionals that met every week to learn about each other and exchange referrals. And I showed up at the first meeting, and it made total sense that you could lift up your whole world by just helping other people. So I really doubled down on that, became really good at it. It's because, here's the reality is that, I can talk about Ken till I'm blue in the face.
Don't do it.
All right, well I can. But I mean, any one of you. I know all of you. I could promote you and feel great about myself. And if you self-promote for 5 minutes, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the essence of those organizations. You just promote the people to the left and to the right, and they're doing the same. So to make a long story short, I had an opportunity to become that organization's first franchisee in 97, and then an opportunity to buy it out in 2003, stopped the Praxel Law, and rebranded it as AmSpirit Business Connections. And it changed the entire trajectory of my life. I became a student of networking. There's a lot of science that goes into why we do the things we do, why things work, why things don't work. So that's led me to write a number of books. I have a podcast that's 600 episodes deep, and it's just I literally get to meet people all over the world. It's amazing.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You appear on my Facebook post more than anybody on the planet.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
You got like 3 or 4 Facebook posts every day.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, both of your bios beg the question, what is networking? And you brought up an example, Frank, about that it's that not necessarily networking yourself, but it's the person to your right and person to the left. So let's dig a little bit deeper about what is networking. What first of all, you, Frank, what's your definition? How do you approach networking, and what's worked for you?
Well, let me tell a quick story, and I'll call it a story. But there's a famous anthropologist out there. Her name is Margaret Mead, And she was teaching a class, and one of the students asked, what was the first sign of human civilization? And as she was kind of gathering herself to answer, everybody's thinking, okay, clay pots, weapons, is it fire, what is it? And her response was a healed femur. In the animal world, you don't see animals that have healed femurs, because a broken femur, which is the bone that connects the knee to the hip, for those who don't know, in the animal world, if an animal breaks its femur, it's a death sentence. But when we came across the remains of humans that had healed femurs, we knew somebody cared enough to stay behind. And that was really the turning point for humanity, because if you stayed behind to care for somebody, you certainly were stronger because you had one more person to help, but you also baked into the equation somebody who was going to be willing to help you. And that gene pool carried forward. The people who were selfish died out. So the question is, what is networking? It's two or more people working towards their mutual benefit. And it's really comes down to just human relations. We all, people think, well, I don't network. Everybody networks. How'd you meet your wife? How do you get a babysitter? We all network. So that's how I look at it. I have a very broad view of networking.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has a need. So the purpose of networking is to try and help someone who has a need. And if you continue to help, and not everybody, and Frank will probably agree with this, not everybody is going to immediately reciprocate if you find out what their need is and you solve that need. Mm-hmm. Some people will do it immediately, and some people, you'll never hear from them again. But as you're doing this, and if you do it long enough and you help enough people, what happens is what I talked about, you build up this social bank account. This people that know you've done things for people, and it's what'll happen is that somewhere along the line they'll be at a cocktail party, be a networking group or somebody, and that person who maybe didn't help you is there, and someone will say your name, and the guy will say, "Oh, I know that guy. He helped me when I really needed it. You really ought to do business with that guy, or you really ought to reach out to that guy." And then that's what happens. That's how networking happens. It may not happen everything you want immediately, but it's somewhere down the line. It will help you with life.
It's kind of like a 401k. You got to keep putting into it to get the returns.
Yeah, but I'm taken out now, so I'm paying the taxes on it. So Frank, I really ought to look at Frank and say, hey, how am I going to get out of paying taxes on this stuff that I'm taking out? But it is like so. I think it's like a social. It's a system. So like. I don't want to quote Milton Friedman, but Milton Friedman said, all debts are paid. I don't know if you know this saying. So if you borrow money from a bank and you have to pay it back, but if you can't pay it back, the bank is going to pay that debt to itself. They're going to absorb that debt. And if enough banks don't pay their debt, the federal government will come in and will pay the debt to the bank. And then what happens is if the federal government pays, then we are the taxpayers are paying that debt. So it is a perfect system. Networking is kind of the same way. It's a perfect system. You help people, they help you, or somewhere down the line they'll help you just because you help them. So that's my view of networking. Frank, am I?
No, you're spot on. You mentioned that people don't necessarily reciprocate, and some people are not in a position to reciprocate. And I'm totally okay with that. I tell people it's just I'm good with putting karma out in the world, because you don't know how that's going to spin its way back around to you.
Yeah.
And things happen to me every day, and wonderful things, and I don't know what drove them, and I just have to believe that somewhere along the way it's something else, something I did.
Yep.
We before we started the podcast, we were talking a little bit about Brett and I creating this podcast, and I was saying, Brett and I have a large enough network and enough people that we have met and talked to over time that we've been real lucky with the podcast in that people are willing to come and talk to us, just like the two of you came in to talk to us today. So I guess we need to give a shout out to all of our networks and thank them for all that they've given us. So I'm going to step back because I want to continue this conversation about what networking is. When I was the director at the agency working with older adults, and I would talk about networking, they'd look at me and go like, what is she talking about? Is that just like going to a cocktail party and talking to my person standing next to me? They really didn't have a concept of what networking was and what it could do for them. And it's not different if they're starting a business or just looking for a job. But how do you get across to individuals how it's going to make a difference for them, and how to build up your network so that you can move forward?
Well, I mean, I tell people all the time, in the long run, we're all self-employed. Well, we are, right? I mean, you got to, you're in the career world. You got to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
There is no 40 years and a gold watch anymore. So we're all self-employed. Some people just choose to sell their hours, 2,000 hours at a time, to one person.
Yeah.
So it's all business, right? It's being, whether you work for the state of Ohio or a not-for-profit or Bath and Body Works, you're in business for yourself, advocating for yourself. So the whole concept of networking really kind of applies evenly to that. Mm-hmm. How does that interplay? I mean, we all need networking. We all do. And people in the business world, people look at networking, they think about it in terms of referrals and sales. But it's so much broader than that. It's being able to reach out to somebody for information. Hey, we're looking for this person to be on our podcast to talk about this.
Or it even could be, I need to buy such and such. Do you know a vendor that I could get a good deal and a fair deal?
Right.
So it's really making it's giving you the ability to move forward.
Yeah.
So the people that are in sales know this, and it's kind of intuitive to them. But when you're in business and you want to get business, you do certain things. In the job search, you basically do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be looking in my business. I'm going to find the people that can hire me. And so the people that can hire me are usually the vice president of sales, who they need some people. So I reach out to them. So in my network, I am networking with all of the vice president of sales in the region that I want to do business in, and in the industries that I want to do business with. So I develop a database of these people, and I reach out to them. Mm-hmm. Job seekers have got to do the same thing. They got to figure out what they want to do, number one. And then they got to figure out who can hire them by title. And once they have that, they can go on like networking groups, social, like LinkedIn, and they can start finding these people that can hire them and reach out to them. That's the networking that they can do to find the next job. It's the same thing that I do when I want to find business.
One of the things I think that for folks who don't consider themselves to be networkers, don't feel that they understand the process, do you think they get hung up on place or situation as opposed to the concept of talking to people? So they think networking comes because they go to a job circle, they go to a job fair, they go and meet people for coffee somewhere, or they go to a cocktail party. So they're thinking of, I've seen a lot of times where somebody will walk into a room, a sea of people are out there, and they just like freeze and walk back out again. They don't understand that notion of just find the first person who's willing to say hello, as opposed to getting confused because there are so many people. They
have the wrong mindset, because that's scary.
It is.
If you're walking into a room, you see all these people over there, and you don't know, you're finding the person in the corner that, that has the same problem with you. But the mindset that I tell people, and it changes things immediately. So when you go to a networking meeting, what you want to do is not say, how many people can help me? You're going to say, I'm going to walk out of this meeting, and I'm going to find 3 people that I can help. That changes your mindset entirely. You feel good about yourself. You want to go in, you feel good. I'm going to find some people, I'm going to talk to them, I'm going to help them.
You feel like you're supposed to be there then.
Well, yeah,
as
because
well.
you should be.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're there to help.
You're there to help.
All right.
So that changes the dynamic entirely when you're in that mindset. You teach that, don't you, Frank?
Oh, I call it the cloak of invincibility.
Get out. You do not.
I do. No, but seriously, I tell people because I mean, here's the thing: is that human development. When as early humans, we were in tribes of about 150, and those were the only people you ever saw in your whole life. And if you saw a stranger, it wasn't good. So we have this natural apprehension towards people we don't know. So we walk into a room, there's people we don't know, this welling up inside. It's totally natural. I'm Mr. Network. I feel it. I'm driving to a networking event. My body is screaming at me, just go sit in your chair at the office. You don't need this. So I love Ken's point. When I walk in, I put on my cloak of invincibility. I am there to help people. Nobody ever rejects Superman. Nobody ever rejects Batman. So when you're that hero with this cloak of invincibility, you're right. It's a game changer. It just changes
I want to
everything.
see the big S.
Yeah.
Trying to get
Big N network.
Oh, there you go.
yeah.
There you go.
I'll tell you, though, I mean, COVID really screwed up a lot of people. It screwed up me.
Yeah.
So, for 2.5 years, I was in my bedroom with my dog, because I could work from home. So I decided, well, it's time to get back out. So I'm going to a networking event. I'm walking in. I'm having a panic attack. Mm-hmm. I'm going, oh my gosh! How many times have we done this? And I'm walking in, and I lost my mojo. So you have to get it. What?
Right. Well, I was going to say, but the opposite I also felt, though, too, is that people were yearning so much to have a networking event or to go face-to-face that it actually kind of made it a little bit easier to approach people because they wanted to talk without the screen in front of their face. So it's a double-edged sword.
Well, that helped
because
me.
you weren't used to the practice of doing it, but people were there because they wanted to do it,
They were almost giddy.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
They were giddy.
Yeah.
Unbelievable how many people are saying, this is so great. I get to see people, and finally I get to meet you off a screen. This is great. It was, and I think that feeling still exists today.
We need to do more of that again. Mm-hmm. We need to get back into the big networking events and press the flesh and talk to people face to face instead of screen to screen.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
I had an employer talk to me last week about a job fair that was going to be all electronic, all virtual, and I just looked at her and I said, "Been there, done that."
Yeah.
We
We're past
especially for older adults, they need to talk to people face to face. That's what they are used to, and making decisions on somebody's ability just because they can get onto Zoom does not necessarily get you the best candidate.
Yeah. There is a lot of truth to that. I read a study that our brains just operate differently in person and over the screen.
Absolutely.
Just different. The way the two lobes are kind of communicating with one another. But there is a lot to be said for Zoom.
Well,
for sure.
Yeah.
It opened up a lot of opportunities that we wouldn't have had we not had the technology.
Well, what it did is it saved us from. But people, I'll give you an example or an anecdote. Somebody will, in the past would say, "Hey, love to have a cup of coffee." Get in the car, go have a 30-minute cup of coffee, come back. It's 90 minutes. Now with Zoom, it's like, okay, it's 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 tops. And then you can say, you know what, this is worthwhile. Let's get together for a cup of coffee. Or, you know what, I don't want to say it wasn't worthwhile, but you know what, I'm not your person. Let me introduce you to Ken or somebody else and save all of that time. Mm-hmm. So over the course of an afternoon or a morning or a day, you can do 5 or 6 of those sorts of things and still be at your desk and get things done. So
I have the other end of that same conversation. I have a lot of people who will say, "Oh, let's do a Zoom or meet me for a cup of coffee or blah blah blah." And I always say, "Can we just have a phone conversation?" Because I figure it'll be one and done. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I'm done with this person. I don't have any more information to give to them and can move them along to someone else. But everybody's gotten into the mindset of doing a Zoom.
Yeah.
And if I say phone call, I can't tell you how many times I still get a Zoom link. So anyway, that was my commentary on phone calls.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get a lot of, let's have a cup of coffee. And I'm thinking, well, have you earned enough to have a cup of coffee? Can I give you 90 minutes of my time? I have no idea what we're going to talk about.
That's true.
So that's how Zoom helps.
Yes, it does. And that answers something that came up during the recession.
Yeah.
I had a consultant who was very open to talking to people to help them in their job search until finally it got to where she was doing all the work. They were networking, and I'm using my little air quotes here, but they weren't doing the work of finding their job. They were depending on her to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so she had to back off because she couldn't get her job done. She was still consulting and she couldn't get the consulting done. So that could be hard.
Yeah. Well, for as large as it is, Columbus is really still a small town. We all tend to know each other, especially if you're Italian in the room and she says she's three
No, I'm only
people
two.
away.
You mean Carol's
away.
Italian? I didn't know she
No,
was.
two people away from knowing everyone. So I guess it does beg the question, does that impact the success in networking in regards to those degrees of separation? What do you think, Frank?
Being a small town, you mean?
Yeah, in regards to, is it detriment being a small town or a large town? Does it help because it's a bigger database of people that you can be connected to? Or is it just overwhelming going, I could never reach that person because they're 3 degrees away from me? Then when you talked in the LinkedIn world, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I interviewed somebody on my podcast and he hit me with this and he's like, there's 8 billion people on the planet and we're all in the same network. We all are. It's just a question of, my network, or, everyone thinks they have their own network. No, we're all kind of connected.
Yeah.
It's interesting, where this whole degrees of separation came from. There was a study that was done in the 60s. Stanley Milgram, who worked at Yale, and what he did was he took 150 packets of information and sent them. He put in 150 envelopes the name of a financial advisor who was in Boston, and said, if you know this person, send it back to him. If you don't, send it to the person you think might know them. And he distributed them at random in Omaha, Nebraska. And so they came back to that financial advisor on average in 6 steps. Mm-hmm. That's where you get 6 degrees of separation.
Is that?
And so, and they further looked at this, and you would think that if it went to 150 people at random, it would come back from 150 people, random people, and it really came back to this financial advisor from 3 or 4. Wow. And so it really comes down to who you know. Do you know connected people or not know connected people? And so that's where I tell people, take a hard look at your network and who are the connectors in your network. You guys, in putting this show together, you probably have some go-tos, right? Mm-hmm. Betty Collins, I'm guessing, is probably a go-to, and there's some other people I don't even know that, okay, we need somebody who we're going to go to. And so, you can be overwhelmed by things, but what I always tell people is try and find those connectors in your world. We talked about before we hit record, Chris Borja, he is, he is very well connected. It's the guy up in Detroit, Terry Bean, who used to live here in Columbus. He is like the center of the universe up there. Every town has these people, and those are the people that you need to really kind of connect to and stop trying to figure out, okay, what is the path? There probably is a really quick path.
Mm.
That brings up an interesting question on when you're going to networking events, to choose a networking event, but to know who's going to be there if you can. When we were dealing with folks during the recession, all of my clients were going to all these networking events, and then they come back to me and say, well, I couldn't get a job there. And I go, well, you weren't meeting with employers. You were meeting with other unemployed people you're all in that same boat, but give each other ideas, tips, maybe possible connections to employers.
Yeah.
They're not needing that connection, but you might. So there were all these things that they could do, but in their mind, that networking was a straight shot to get a job, and that's not really what it is.
No, there's there's 2 types of food. There's good food and there's junk food, and networking sometimes is the same way. Is that you can you take a little of both, but we want to work in the networking world of really true food, which would be people that are in your industry, associations, professional associations. I cannot tell you how many people I have talked to that says, I want a job in human resources. And I said, well, that's great. Do you belong to Haraco? Well, no, I don't.
What's Haraco?
Well, yeah. Well, are you serious about your Are you serious about your trade?
Right.
Yeah. So those are the positive things that you ought to do is to network in professional organizations, because those people are like you. They know what you know, but they can help you in other instances. So the other thing Frank brought this up. He always brings up good stuff. I'm going to say here. So, The Tipping Point.
Yeah.
By Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah.
That deal about strong ties and weak ties.
Yeah.
So there was this is Granovetter. He said that informal contacts are where you find your job.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to the people that you know first, and you network with those people who will send you the people that they know, and then send you to the people that they know. So until you got to the third, is it the third level, Frank? I think the third level.
Yes, I mean, it's essentially what they did in the study. The people responded in the study that the people that they knew really well were not a good source at all.
Right.
Yeah.
It's till you got to the people, their friends' friends.
Yeah.
Is that where they found their jobs?
Yeah, it's like, for me, I love my family, but I'm not going to network through my wife because we know the same people.
Yeah.
But when I start meeting with people that she knows that I don't know, that's when there's tons of opportunity.
Now, being Italian in a town the size of Columbus with a huge Italian population.
Yeah, you're all related.
We're all related. But, the relationship is always different than just husband, wife, children, grandchildren. But it is that, that really is the key is the first person is not who you're going to get the information from, it's who they know.
Yeah.
When I would do workshops for older clients, we would do a networking workshop, and we had a game. So I'd come in with my McDonald's coffee gift cards so that they could take somebody to coffee. And I'd say, in the conversation of when we're talking about networking, I'm going to mention people, places to you that I'm connected to. So you figure out how you're connected to me through them. I always got rid of my gift certificates.
That's
people
a great
always
exercise.
Figure that out. We did it with our students when I was at Ohio State, and one young man decided he knew me because of his aunt went to my high school.
Really?
And I said, well, but I didn't know your aunt. So there's a missing link there. And he goes, well, did you know so-and-so? And I said, yes. And he said, well, okay, there's the link. I go, but tell me why it's a link. He couldn't answer that. So I made him call this person on the phone. And they kept talking. And luckily, my friend was listening and trying to figure out what was going on. And I finally said, ask your contact who his wife is. His wife was my cousin.
Oh, my gosh.
So it took about 3 hours to get to that point. It's an exercise.
Yeah.
Networking is not off the top of your head. And so this leads me to my next question. There are skills to be a good networker.
Yeah.
What are those skills and how do they learn? Ken, go for it.
Your mother taught you everything you need to know about connecting before you were 10 years old.
Oh, I love that.
Number one, make friends. Number two, play nice. Number three, take a bath. Number four, do your homework.
I have never heard.
Definitely number 4 out of COVID, take a bath. Exactly.
So yeah. So
That's a whole new list.
I'm going to give that one to you.
Oh, yes. Oh, I love it. I love that. That's wonderful. Do you have any follow-up on that?
Yeah. I guess that number one, there's two. Well, number one is smile. So when I walk into a store now anymore, instead of frowning, I'm smiling. So people smile back at you. He's smiling. Which is good. And the other one is that I've used the word, and I was given this by Tom Wentz, who's a mentor of mine. Use the word terrific. Just use the word to say, how you doing? Terrific. Really? Why do you it's not saying, well, I'm okay. If you use those, if you are enthusiastic, so that's the other thing. Smile, use the word terrific, enthusiastic, people will be drawn to you. They'll just come and I don't, do you teach that, Frank, in your groups? Or?
I don't necessarily teach that, but it's certainly, you have to make a decision as to how you're going to show up in the world.
Yeah.
You just have to, whether you're saying terrific or, and what I will say to people is just hypothetically, when you walk into a room and you have a choice between two people, are you going to the person who's smiling or the person who's a mope?
Yeah.
Now, there are people out there who are mopey and they get some attention and but nobody, people are just nice short term. Long term, they want the person who's got that smile on their face or who's maybe not saying terrific, but that's on their face, right? That's how they're carrying themselves in their shoulders and whatnot.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would just go at my clients and say, you have to be a good listener. You cannot just go into a network, any situation with another person and just keep talking. And because when you take a breath, they're going to walk away. They're not going to respond. It's just too much. You have to be a good listener. And as you said, how can you help other people? You can't help them unless you know what they need.
Yeah. Definitely listen. People, when I go out and work with groups, they're always like, oh, networking events, I hate it. I never know what to say. Good. Because you shouldn't, it's about you getting them talking and they're going to feel like you are the most interesting person in the world because you've made them feel good and had an opportunity to learn about them. Eventually they'll want to find out about you.
If you think about that, if you go at it with that approach and you're listening and you're listening and you're listening, that person you're talking to may not even realize that you're unemployed looking for a job. You've not even set the stage.
Right.
They're going to come back and ask about you after they've talked about themselves for 15 minutes and go, it's going to surprise them that you are unemployed or you're looking for a job and they're networking. I think it's going to catch them off guard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That it's just that, wow, you listen to me and you're here really in a different need than I am.
Right.
It's pretty amazing.
Who have mastered that skill are politicians. So I cannot tell you how many times that somebody says, I met Jimmy Carter or I met this person, and they made me feel like I was the only person in the room. Mm-hmm. They are taught that because that's the way that you should approach people and get votes because there's a trust that's built up. And we didn't talk about trust yet though, Frank, right? There's got to be some trust there that you're building up in the networking, that you're going to do what you said and I'm going to do what I said and I'm going to follow up and that type of thing. There's a trust built up there, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think trust is, trust is the most important thing that we do.
Yeah.
It's just determining whether we trust somebody. And again, that harkens back to time long ago, but we are constantly cycling through our head very subconsciously, okay, can I trust this person?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And every day, I just silly things. You get on a Zoom call and you think it's supposed to be about just getting acquainted and they're going to pitch you. That just violates trust.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to have a Zoom call with person A, person B shows up. Well, that's a problem, but just all sorts of things like that. And so it certainly gets down to, when you walk into a conversation and you dominate it, people get the sense very subconsciously that, okay, this person doesn't really care about me. Mm-hmm. But if you stop and you listen, you are conveying to them, okay, this person cares.
Yeah. Well, we kind of talk about this best practices in networking. I think we've hit on it on 1 of 10 listing. But, Frank, of that list, you list a top 5 you feel are critical. I mean, yes, listening is probably right there in that top 5.
Yeah, I always tell people, find ways to add value to others. I think that's probably the that's probably the number one thing, and covers lots of things. But as humans, again, we're cycling through our mind who we can trust, who is out for us or who's out for themselves. And if you're adding value to other people, listening is a way of adding value, encouraging people, making introductions is another way of adding value. There's lots of things we can do to add value to other people, but that's certainly one of them. The other thing I like to talk about is just have the mindset that every contact has opportunity, because you just don't know who that person is connected to. I talk about this in my first book, Foundational Networking. I was an extra in the movie The Shawshank Redemption.
I love this story. I was hoping you were going to tell it.
I was parking downtown. I was a tax consultant. I was parking downtown. It was a garage close to the office. It was cheap. The only catch is you had to leave your keys. So you leave your keys every day, which is a little unnerving if you own a car, because you don't know what they're doing with it all day. But I just made it a point, probably very subconsciously, to get to know these parking lot attendants who I'm handing my keys off to. And the woman who was in charge, her name was Twyla. And I would just talk to her every day. Nothing, not a cup of coffee conversation, just a, hey, how are you doing? How's your daughter doing? Is that your granddaughter? Did you go to the zoo? Oh, that's really nice. She stopped me one day and said, hey, how'd you like to be an extra in a movie? I'd love to. Now, she said, we're looking for attorney types. They are looking for attorney types. We're shooting up in Upper Sandusky, and the opening scene in The Shawshank Redemption is a courtroom. I got cast as a prisoner, of all ironies. But I literally...
Was it?
Maybe not. But here's the thing. I got to spend a day on the set with Morgan Freeman.
Oh.
Talk about a genuine human being. Hey, I'm Morgan. Yeah, I know you're Morgan.
No, that's good.
Yeah, I'm Frank. That's a better, it's a better question.
Can I do your taxes?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I realized at that moment, it's like there were hundreds of attorney types coming and going, and I was probably one of the only people that stopped and gave her that sort of respect. Now, I'm not a Hollywood star. I didn't get discovered or anything like that, but it was an opportunity. And
you got a story out of it.
I certainly have a story out of it, but there's
if nothing else,
but
a great story.
Well, the other story I tell along these lines, there's a gentleman who's from Columbus. His name is Lewis Howes, and Lewis is very, very well known now. And he's got his third book out. He tells the story in the beginning of the book of how we met. And he came up to me. I gave a speech. He came up to me after the speech, and we just started talking. And I could tell he was down on his luck. He was shoving food in his pocket. And I just took him to lunch. And we just, would go to lunch occasionally and touch base. And he says, I'm thinking about writing a book. So he and I co-wrote a book together. But along the way, people are like, why are you wasting time with this loser? The guy's unemployed. He's just, what is he doing? Why? That's not a good use of time. It's like, I don't know. I just, it's just somebody needs help, and that's what we're supposed to do. So certainly every contact that has opportunity, you don't know. And I think the third thing, I'll cap it at 3. There's no shame in asking. If you're out there being a genuine person in your network, you need to be willing to ask of your network. There's an author out of the he's a professor at University of Michigan. His name is Dr. Wayne Baker, and he wrote a book called All You Have to Do Is Ask. And he has done a lot of work on the whole notion of asking, and that's what holds people back, is they're not willing to ask. But when you get to read the book, it's interesting because there was a study he talks about in there, and there are really 2 types of asks. One is kind of a dependent ask. Give me a fish. Would you give me a fish? And the other is more of an empowered sort of an ask. It's, would you teach me to fish?
Yeah.
And what the study shows is that people are energized by coming to the aid of somebody who's got that empowered ask. Of course I'll teach you to fish. I would love to take an afternoon and teach you how to fish, because then you'll never have to ask me for another fish. Whereas if somebody's coming to us and saying, hey, will you give me a fish, or will you give me a job, or will you do these things for me, it just becomes exhausting. So those 3 things.
Yeah.
That leads me right to my next question, and another good story about being afraid to ask. I heard this when I was directing the agency, and a gentleman had lost his job. He was at a very high level at a large corporation here in town, and he literally hid in his house for a year because he was too embarrassed to let people know he had lost his job and was afraid to ask for help. One of his neighbors finally figured out what was going on, because every once in a while they'd see him sneak out and get his mail and sneak back into the house, and they're wondering, like, why isn't he at work? This was long before we were Zooming from home. Sure. And went over and talked to him. And within, I think it was a month, this man had a job.
Yeah.
And here he had sat back and was afraid to ask for help. So my next question is, my older job seekers seem to have the most trouble.
Yeah.
Young folks tend to kind of like to talk, especially about themselves, but they like to talk to people. Older adults were not used to not having work, not having a job, and didn't know how to ask. What are the tips that you would give them to build up their confidence to be good networkers?
Well, boomers, I assume we're talking about boomers, they were taught that you stay with one company for 40 years, and that's what you were supposed to do. And my whole family worked in Detroit in the automotive industry. They came over from Europe, and they all were there. They were Ford, Chrysler, DeSoto, all those. And they worked on jobs that they hated for years just because it was the thing to do, is that they would retire from the companies. And if you lost your job, it was almost like a mark against you. That, and I remember my dad, I was 35 years old, and my dad says to me, you better find a company that you're going to stay with for the rest of your life, because, you're getting old. And I'm going, are you kidding me? So there's a stigma there that, like a guy that was in the house for a year, there's a stigma there that you are tainted. So the deal was back then is that, Joe lost his job. Don't tell anybody.
Right.
But now it's Joe lost his job. Tell everybody.
Yeah.
It's an entirely different dynamic. So that's one of the stigmas it's there. And that there's a lot of very, very good talent out there because you're playing maybe the third quarter or the fourth quarter of your life, that it isn't as worth as much as if you were young, and that's absolutely not true. There are companies out there that are dying for good talent. You just gotta believe that you have good talent. There are age discriminations on both sides of the spectrum. It's age discrimination from the young kids coming out that they don't know anything, and they're not going to stay at your company very long, so you better not hire them because they're only going to stay 18 months and they're going to be gone. But there's the other stigma that if the average tenure of a new employee is like 3 years right now, and you have somebody that has a 10-year runway in your career, who the heck are you going to hire? You're going to hire the person that's going to be with you for the next 10 years because they know what the deal is. So those are the stigmas that I see, Carol. I tried to get beyond that. Networking is very difficult for, I remember, I actually, you asked me to speak at one of the sessions at the Employment for Seniors job fair, and I remember this guy. He was in the corner, and my talk was about networking, and I had this presentation here, and I'm looking at him, and he's got his arms crossed.
Yeah,
he's staring me down. This guy, and he's a professional. He's like, there is no way I'm doing any of that stuff. So finally. He comes up to me afterwards and he says, do you really believe all that? And I said, I absolutely, truly believe all that. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe all that. Come to my networking group. So he came to Scioto Ridge at that time, and he was networking everything. And he ended up with the job of like a director of logistics for Abbott Foods. And it's like, and he says, anytime you want somebody to work at Abbott Foods, you call me. And I'll find a job for them at Abbott Foods. And that's what it took. It's the networking part of the deal that brings people out of their shelves, understand it's okay, I'm going to find a job this way, and they do.
Yeah. Well, after the past few years of job recruiting and job searching techniques have gone through some major changes, Frank, is technology the only change to networking, or other changes become necessary as we've walked out of this? Well, run out of this. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
I get the question. Well, I've gotten the question for years. What's LinkedIn going to do to networking? What's Zoom going to do to networking? And my response is, are you going to edit this out if you need to? But where do babies come from now? They still come from the same damn place, right?
They do.
We still have relationships the same way. And so all Zoom does is really facilitate our ability to communicate, right? Mm-hmm. I can have a 10-minute call with somebody in Dublin, Ohio over Zoom, and it's only going to take us each 10 minutes.
Yeah.
We're not having
Or you could have a 10-minute call with somebody in Dublin, Ireland. It's only going to take you 10 minutes.
Right.
It's a tool. Yeah.
But the relationships are still built the same way. We still have to come to getting to know people, like people, and trust people. So I don't know, Carol, you said it, it's a tool. It's, Betsy Ross met George Washington at church, right?
Yeah.
So we networked back then. We've networked for eons. This just allows us to network further and faster. That's all technology has done.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Carol, I want to amplify one thing that I said about do older adults have specific challenges? And there are two things that I'm facing as an older adult. Number one is energy. So when you're going to networking events, make sure that you have the energy when you walk in and when you walk out, that you keep that energy level up so that you are presenting the right persona. Mm-hmm. The other is choose wisely. So if you're going to take a look at different networking events, choose the one that you think makes most sense to you, that will make the most value. So energy and choosing the right networking events right now for older adults, I think, is important. Otherwise, you get tired. I mean, you just lose your, it takes energy. When I go to a client meeting now, and the client meeting lasts for 2 hours, that's about it for the rest of the day. I mean, there's a lot. You're on stage. You're trying to make a good impression. You're doing the same way with networking, that afterwards you've used all of your energy up at that networking event.
Well, and too, it's so easy to be frustrated in a networking event.
Yeah.
Because things don't go as smoothly as we hope they will.
Right.
Even if we think we're in our best game, not everybody is going to be in their best game. So frustration is also energy draining.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Probably more so.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more so.
Yeah, exactly.
So that takes me then to my next question. I think one of the hardest things I've wrestled with when I was talking to clients and students is, where do you go? Where's the best place to go to network? And it really does have to be a place that is going to be comfortable for you, that you're going to get the most out of the time you're putting into it. Zooming may make things faster, but networking takes time, and you want to use your time wisely. What organizations would you consider? And for listeners, one of the things that we do with our podcast is create resource sheets. So this is all going to go onto our resource sheets, so listeners will be able to tap into it later. But just tell us your own groups as well as other groups that you feel are really worth people's time and looking at networking. And we're talking Central Ohio, but if you know of other organizations outside of Central Ohio or national organizations, let's get those too.
Well, the one that we run right now that is free to anyone who wants to come is called Tuesday Tune-Up, and it's for job seekers that are in transition. And we always have good guest speakers that come on, and Frank's been a guest speaker at a lot of times at all of our networking events. And we always talk about job search, leadership, all kinds of things within the job search. So just go to my website and go to networking and I will send you the link. Zoom, I found out, doesn't like you to put your link out there on social media. they'll find it. They'll find it they'll tell you don't do this. And I couldn't ever figure out why until I got someone came on my Zoom call that I did not want and was very disruptive that I had to take off. So please come. We started it up again. That's one of the things that I have. We talked about professional groups and associations within your industry. If you're human resources, it would be Heraco. If you're in logistics, it would be the Columbus Society for CSCMP. Columbus Society for, I can't remember, CSCMP for logistics people.
We'll get that into our resources. We'll figure it out.
Okay. Meetup. The Meetup app. I don't know if you people have if you look at the Meetup app, but you can put in your interests in the Meetup app and find out where the different Meetup groups are in Columbus. Now, I found out that when I go to some of these Meetup groups, or virtually what have you, or go to an event, I try to get the ones that I don't know anything about. And you go there and you find all kinds of neat people there, and it's very it's really very makes you energized to find out people that are not like you, that are different than you. So Meetup is huge.
So that's how you got into model airplanes then?
No, pens. That's how I make.
I'm joking.
Did I make you a pen, Frank? Do you have a Ken's pen?
No, I don't.
Oh, I gotta make a Ken's pen. I gave Carol one here. Carol has a Ken's pen.
Nice.
Okay.
There is a lot of stuff, conventions that are in Columbus. So if you look at Convention Bureau, you can find out what conventions are coming, plus trade shows. Trade shows is a big way to find companies that you didn't even know existed, to go to trade shows, and especially if they're in your field. And the other thing is, the last one I have here, it's called serendipity. And that's when you're standing in line at the grocery store, and you strike up a conversation with someone in front of you and find out they're the wife of the president of Cardinal Foods or Cardinal Health or whatever.
Yep.
The other one is that I'll never forget this story. We always have to what our elevator pitch is. You know, everybody has to memorize their elevator pitch. So I'll never forget this one girl. She was over at Columbus State. And not it was it wasn't Columbus State. What's the one that went out of? I think it was Columbus State. She got on an elevator, and this person was next to her, and introduced himself and says, "What do you do?" And she gave her elevator pitch in an elevator, and got a job as an administrative assistant because she was talking to one of the directors at the school. So serendipity. Those things that happen are networking.
Yeah, we had one of the sessions at the agency was a panel discussion of HR people. And gentleman in the back, I remember this vividly, was talking about, and he was asking a question about his resume, about where to place things, that sort of thing. And he comes upon, starts talking about, it's like, well, I've got it lower on my resume that I'm fluent in Spanish. And one of the panelists up there said, we need to talk afterwards.
Yeah.
Because we need to have that bilingual for in HR, whatever department it was. It was Honda that needed that.
Yeah.
He just happened to, didn't think it was important to put that up higher on his resume that he was fluent, I think it was Spanish, whatever language it was. Boom, right there. It was just jaw-dropping. I've told that story a million times, that just because he happened to say that he spoke a second language, he pretty much, I don't know whether he got a job or not, but it was there.
Well, he didn't think it was important, but it was tremendously important.
Tremendously important at that moment in time. Serendipity. Yeah.
Even if he didn't get a job there with Honda, he got a good life lesson to move that up on his resume.
Right. So the things you don't think are important to somebody. You just don't know at some point in time.
Well, that's where you get, to the word serendipity. I mean, he may have been in a setting and it was perfectly fine on his resume exactly where it's at. It's just, but I think that underscores the point is that you can't judge these things. I love the advice, Ken, of just getting on Meetup and just going to some, whatever. I don't want to say a crazy group, you know, but just go meet people because we're all connected.
Something outside of your
go meet
your
people.
world. And for both of you, I mean, you guys have been networking for years. You don't know everybody, but you probably know a lot of people. So what a great opportunity to go to a group that when you don't really know that many, if anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
I got on a group, and it's like I'm a total nerd, but I metal detecting.
Oh.
So I got on this group, I got excited, so I bought a metal detector. And the guy around down the street, his grandmother owns a farm. So I went out in the field with this metal detector. I must have looked like a total nerd out there. And I'm finding all kinds of old nails and old farm equipment stuff out there. I thought I was an archaeologist,
Right.
But I was just finding old metal. But there's a lot of people out there that they're cool.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one top issue I did want to include in the list of the best practices is the need for immediate action, whether it's a thank you note, research, or possibly completing applications or sending resumes, just doing what you're supposed to do. It's important to do your follow-up. Frank, any additional steps as a networker should complete after a connection is made or after a networking event?
I like writing handwritten notes. I will go to an event. I do a lot worldwide now, nationwide, just because of the growth of my business. But I have gone to a lot of business first breakfasts, a lot of events locally, and I'll go there. And my rule of thumb is I try to meet 5 people. If there's 5 people there, 5 people. If there's 5,000, 5 people. And I will leave the event. I won't go far. I'll get a Coke, and I'll write handwritten notes.
Do you write them on the back of the card, Frank, or do you write? Oh, let me see. Do you write on the back of the card?
No, like a note card, a thank you card.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yep. I'll have a card, and so I encourage people to do that because most people don't. Most people don't. And I am shocked. I met a guy on a train who was like an expert, networking expert. We exchanged cards, whatever. And I wrote him a note, and he never even wrote a note or acknowledged me. I'm like, you're a fraud. But at any rate, and that note, what I encourage that note to have is just a simple thank you for their time. You don't need to say, hey, this is Bob, I need a job, right, or anything like that. Certainly follow up with something that maybe you pledged to do. Hey, we were talking. You said you were looking for a new admin. I know somebody. If you email me, I'll get you their name. Something beyond what you're looking for. Those things are memorable.
Yeah, I agree.
One thing, because I'm a handwritten note giver, sender, it's very difficult to get addresses today.
That is true.
And I've had to find an electronic hand note because I have somebody's email, but there have been times that I have searched everywhere and cannot find somebody's address, even going to the county auditor's website to see if they own property anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. Handwritten notes I still think are the best way to communicate and to show you are willing to go the extra steps. But if you don't have an address, there are other ways.
Well, for much of the crowd we're talking to, Bath and Body Works will probably always have an address, right? I mean, some of the bigger employers, they'll always have an address. But you're right, there are solopreneurs out there that just, it's...
And often websites don't have addresses.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Exactly.
So,
yep.
Some tips.
I got 10.
Okay, you go for it.
I wrote them down. This is my 10 cardinal rules of networking, and I think Frank gave me 7 of them.
Okay.
Number 1, it takes patience. 2, it's a learned skill. Number 3, you have to believe in the process. Number 4, you have to be strategic. Number 5, it requires a diversified plan. In other words, a lot of different types of networking events. Do it with courtesy. Think creatively. And the first and second rule of networking is give first and then give back. and show integrity and reliability. And number 10, which is the most important, and a lot of people, some people are very good at this, is make it easy for people to help you. Know what you want. So I have a friend who has been out of work a couple times over the past few years, and I'll always get this call from Scott, Ken, can you meet with me? And I says, yeah. So he's got an Excel spreadsheet, and he's got all the companies that he wants to work for, and he's got the names of the people in that company who can hire him. He says, Ken, do you know any of these people? And I'll say, yeah, I know this one, I know this one, I know this one. He says, that's enough. 3 would be enough. He says, can you introduce me? Not recommend me, because introduction and recommend are two big differences. He said, can you introduce me? I said, I'll do that. But that took about 10, 15 minutes, and he knew exactly what he wanted me to do, and it was easy for me to help him. Have you run into, like, can you find me a job versus can you tell me where or
who do you know? Do you know this person?
Yeah, that's it.
I generally have people coming to me saying, hey, I've lost my job and everybody says I need to talk to you.
Yeah, they do.
Well, and I say, listen, I don't have a Greyhound bus traveling the city that's come pick up Ed. He needs a job, And I always tell people I look at networking like golf, right? Golf is not about hitting a ball 400 yards and dropping it in a hole. Golf's about hitting the ball, 100 yards at a time.
Move it forward.
Move it forward. Just move it forward. Every shot's going to get you a little closer. And that's how people need to look at networking. And so I'll tell people who come to me, listen, I don't necessarily know people who are hiring, but I know people who know people. And that'll be my introduction, my help to you. And occasionally there's, somebody's looking. I just ran into somebody, but it doesn't happen that serendipitously. Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
I think we've hit as many words of wisdom as we can, but if you have any last words of wisdom.
I get to ask this question all the time. Frank, if people could do one thing, what would you have them do? And my response is volunteer. Find something you love to do, something you're passionate about, and get out there and volunteer, because you're going to find yourself elbow to elbow who care about the same thing you do. You don't have to come flying in and saying I'm unemployed or anything like that. All that stuff will come out, or this is my business. But they're going to know that you care about something other than yourself. But the people who see you volunteering, who have no interest in what you're doing, oh, it's a pet charity, I could care less. But they know just by virtue of the fact that you're giving your time that you're a good person. And I just think getting out and doing that, and just it's probably good. Well, it is good for the soul just to kind of get out there and give.
Mentally get out of your own headspace.
Yes.
See a larger world.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about the executive who's stuck in his basement.
Right.
What he needed was just to be out there. Well, I remember early on when I had a law practice, I had a client who wasn't going to pay me $500. It was very clear. I was beside myself. Right. I was just so dejected. It wasn't a game changer, but it just bothered me that somebody would have that little integrity. And I remember going to a network meeting. Well, you okay, Frank? What's happening? Yeah, somebody's not paying me. Oh, that happened to me last week. At that moment, I realized, you know what? That the network can help you just kind of get through these little moments. You know what? Everybody has this. Yeah. This is business. It's going to happen again. Mm-hmm. So your guy, getting out and finding out that, being let go in this day and age, I don't want to call it a badge of honor, but it's not that badge of shame that it once was.
Right. Very much.
Right.
Very much.
Right. Yeah.
Any last words of wisdom?
I tell everybody to call Frank.
Okay. We'll put Frank's number on our resources.
There you go.
Well, many thanks to our networking experts, Ken Lazar from Ability Professional Network and Frank Egan from Spirit Business Connections for joining us. Listeners, thank you for joining us. And don't forget to check out our show notes on the website for contact information, the resources we mentioned. We'll have it all collected together. You can also find all of this information on the website at lookingforwardourway.com. And we're looking forward to hearing your feedback on this or any of our other podcast episodes.